G'day guys, Mark and Sam after work here. Bullet trace. People ask all sorts of things. Now there's a couple of things. Bullet trace and traces. Why don't you use traces? To start off with bullet trace. What you're actually looking at with that blurry, there's sharp lines or blurry lines or whatever it is that you see on a short range shot. You'll see it on our 600 yard shots. You can sometimes see it on 1,000 yard shots. We've sent it out to around about the 1,200, 1,300 yards. You can see it sometimes. What you're actually looking at is the pressure cone or the sonic cone, basically where that pressure wave of something traveling faster than the speed of sound causes a shock wave, which is actually traveling along just behind the bullet, actually emanating from the nose of the projectile, but it's coming along and you can actually see this shock wave. And you can actually see it. It's actually, as you sometimes will see shock waves in slow motion videos and that sort of stuff of explosions, well, that's the shock wave you're actually seeing. You need a couple of conditions. You need good light, you need contrasting image so you can actually see that shock wave. If it's traveling through clear air or something like that in the blue sky, you're not going to see anything. If you've got a very clean, smooth background, you're not going to see anything. If you've got sharp, contrasting image that you're actually looking at, and then you can see the definition of this shock wave, this pressure wave, like a fluid, like two fluids sitting on each other, that sort of difference in things, then it shows up in the background you've got. You also need bright light to be able to see that. Without the bright light, you don't get that definition, you don't get the contrast, you can't see it. But the other super important detail you need to see that is you need to be very supersonic in its speed, so that then it has that shock wave you can actually see. The more supersonic it is, the more of that shock wave that's traveling, and the more you'll actually see it. So when it comes to long range, there's some other so once we go out past the 1,200, 1,300 or 1 mile, or going out to even further in the 1.5 mile or 2 mile shots, there are some big differences that are changing. One is you're getting a long way away, so anything you can see is a lot smaller, a lot harder to see to start off with. But in general, in an ELR shot, you've gone subsonic, so that shock wave is no longer there in any noticeable sense, although there is still stuff that's traveling as it pushes through the air. It's no longer creating that shock wave because of it's gone subsonic. But the biggest detail we're actually dealing with is you also need clear focus. And if you're focused, the cameras are focused, or you're focused on anything on your target, you can't see stuff that's halfway. You're not in focus to it. So any definition that would be there, let alone largely an ELR shot, it's going to be traveling up. So it's going to be more likely traveling through the blue sky. So you've lost your contrasting image. You're not in focus with it. And by the time you are in focus with it, it's slowed down. It means ultimately, for all those reasons, the trace or that shock wave, the bullet trace is just not visible, usable to get on target, able to be shown off in any sense once you go into an ELR shot. We don't even see it out to 1 mile. You will see in around the 1,200 yards, 1,300 yards, we've seen it, and largely if we can see it, we can show it on videos, but that's as far as you'll see it. So both for people who want to see it, no, it's not possible in ELR shots, but also for people who are thinking they can use it. I can go out and use the trace. You can't see it because you can't see it. It's not in a visible place when you're having those sorts of shots. Now the other bit I mentioned in that goes into tracers and using bullet traces to be able to see things. Because they've seen images, CGI generated images or military images of where they're used, largely where a tracer is used, which was used to put things on the target in the likes of the 50 BMG. The way they were used, a tracer is only a guide. Tracers largely weren't a full round. They were a round that they fired alongside things, and I've forgotten the actual description, but I know that they were a round that had a similar trajectory with a particular tracer round in there. For us, it's all academic because they're not legal to use. They wouldn't be sensible to use a tracer out in our brown, sunburnt country in the way of setting off bushfires and things like that. But here's the big ingredient. Even if you got around all those details, there's 2 big ingredients to go with this. In daytime, the little tiny thing that you're going to be looking at is not really going to come up as a visible thing for an extended range shot. It's not bright enough to do that side of things. But the big detail that goes with the tracer is they're not accurate. They're not the extreme accuracy you need for ELR. We need an extremely consistent ballistic coefficient in a well-shaped bullet to do that. The nature of a tracer means it's burning off part of the bullet. That's actually what you're seeing. That means that the bullet shape is actually changing a little bit. So it means you have an inconsistent ballistic coefficient, which means that you then have not got a super accurate round. It'll still be okay accurate, and it still works to some degree or another to get on into your moderate range shots, into out to the 1,000 yards. You'll see things with moderate accuracy, but for the extreme accuracy we're chasing, no, a tracer isn't a conceivable thing in any shape, form, fashion. Not legal, not accurate enough, and not bright enough, and like I said, no logic to go with that once you follow down that road. So listen, I hope that was informative on both your normal bullet trace and where you can use it and can see it, and on the trace around on where you can use it and where it is practical to use. Anyway guys, thank you for checking in, and we'll catch you next time.